A laboratory rat stopped eating, drinking, sleeping. It just stood there, pressing a lever over 2,000 times an hour until it collapsed from total exhaustion. The scientists thought their rat was experiencing pure pleasure, but they were wrong. The rat wasn't happy. It was trapped. Everyone talks about discipline, focus, willpower, mindset, and yet that might not be enough. Our brains are running a software that was designed hundreds of thousands of years ago to keep us alive in the wilderness. But some of the most profitable companies in human history have figured out how to exploit every line of that software. And the same mechanism that hijacked that rat's brain is now running inside your phone, your feed, and every app you open without even thinking. The same psychological trap that keeps you glued to a screen for hours is also one of the most powerful customer loyalty engines ever discovered. So the real question isn't whether this trap exists, it's whether you're on the receiving end of it or finally turning it to your competitive advantage. In 1954, two scientists at McGill University in Canada stumbled onto something completely unexpected. Those scientists were James Olds and Peter Milner, and they were just trying to understand the brain better. They stuck a tiny electrode into a brain of a laboratory rat, and the plan was to test the brain's alerting response. But the scientists missed that specific area of the brain and inserted the electrodes into a tiny unknown cluster of cells instead. They put a rat in a box, and in one corner there was a lever. If the rat pushed the lever, it got a tiny spark of electricity directly into that specific spot in its brain. What happened next was a biological nightmare for the rat. The rat didn't just like the lever, the rat became obsessed with it. It stopped eating, drinking, ignored its mate, it wouldn't even sleep. It just stood there, hour after hour, pushing the lever. The rat reportedly pushed it over 2,000 times an hour, until the poor animal eventually collapsed from total exhaustion. Olds and Milner thought they had found the pleasure center of the brain. But they were wrong. Only decades later, it was discovered that the truth was more intricate. That spark wasn't giving the rat pleasure. It was triggering an intense, compulsive wanting, without ever delivering satisfaction. The rat wasn't pushing the lever because it felt good, it was pushing the lever because its brain was screaming that the next push would be the one that finally feels good. But why does it even matter? Because this is the key to unlocking one of the most fundamental principles of human behavior and understanding the hardware inside our own head. Evolution designed this system to keep us alive. It forced our ancestors to keep hunting for food and searching for water because the anticipation of finding them felt so intense. It was a survival mechanism. But in the modern world, that mechanism has been hijacked.
Because every time we check our phone, we're playing the slot machine to see, what did I get?
We have moved from a world of scarcity to a world of infinite, monetized and even weaponized levers. Every notification, every headline, every scroll, the only difference is the people holding the levers aren't scientists anymore. They are some of the most profitable companies in human history. So, what exactly was happening inside the rat's brain? Because the same thing is happening inside yours and mine. Your brain is not a single unified machine. It's actually a collection of systems, sometimes working together, sometimes pulling in completely opposite directions. And buried deep inside is a primitive circuit, ancient, fast, and almost impossible to override consciously. When something unexpected happens, a sound, a movement, a vibrating phone, your brain instantly releases a tiny burst of dopamine. Not because something good happened, but because something might be about to happen. That burst gives you energy, focus, and a pull toward whatever triggered it.
There's something called dopamine reward prediction error. When we expect something to happen, we are highly motivated to pursue it.
In the wild, it turns our resting ancestor into a seeking hunting machine. And here's the critical part. The more unpredictable the trigger and the reward, the stronger the pull becomes. In nature, rewards were never guaranteed. Sometimes our ancestors followed tracks and found food. Sometimes they didn't. And that uncertainty is exactly what kept them moving. Because their brain learned that maybe is more powerful than always yes. A guaranteed reward eventually becomes boring. The dopamine spikes fades, interest drops, but with a possible reward, that spike never plateaus, it only gets stronger. And that's the variable reward system. It was critical to our survival, but here's where it gets interesting. That dopamine surge was only ever meant to be half the story. Once our ancestors actually caught the prey or found the water, the second half of the reward system kicked in. The body released a different set of chemicals, the ones that actually make you feel satisfied. And those told the brain that you're done, you can stop now, time to rest and relax. But the modern levers we're pressing today are specifically engineered to trigger the first half. The craving, the seeking, the dopamine, without ever delivering the second.
Well, all I have to do is to keep scrolling and scrolling, and that scrolling uses the exact same psychology as pulling on a slot machine.
There's no satisfaction, no closure, no you're done, time to relax. There's just an itch that's never meant to go away. For most of human history, that itch had a natural finish line, a scratch. How do you feel when you finally complete a difficult project like renovating a kitchen? There is a specific sense of relief. The levers we were pressing historically were physical in nature and with a clear finish line. You hunted an animal, you ate, and the loop closed. But in the early 21st century, the world has changed. With the rise of computers, social media, and smartphones, we entered the era of the attention economy. And so in this new world, the most valuable resource on the planet is no longer oil or gold or land. It's the time you spend looking at a screen. Think about where you spend most of your time online. YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Instagram, whatever. They don't sell content. They sell your attention. The companies that dominate this era, Google, Meta, TikTok, all run the same business model. They are attention brokers. And these giants realized something profound. If they could keep your dopamine gas pedal pressed down without ever letting you hit the brakes of satisfaction, they could effectively own your time. And the more of your time they own, the more they can sell you.
Basically, it's the business of gathering a crowd by creating something so alluring, so sensational, or maybe even useful that you can't help but pay attention. And then the crowd itself is sold to advertisers.
Before, these companies were designing tools to help you achieve something. Find information, connect with friends, share images. It was a tool. But a tool is something you use and then put away. You use a hammer to drive a nail. Some people use a screwdriver, but once the nail is in, you're satisfied and you stop. That's what those digital platforms used to be, tools. But today, they don't feel like tools anymore, do they? In the physical world, our reward system was designed to have a natural finish line. But in the digital world, think about the infinite scroll. There's no bottom, no finish line. Is this a coincidence? I wish. The tech giants deliberately work with psychologists, neuroscientists, and behavioral experts to study exactly how human attention works. They took that 1954 experiment with rats and scaled it to billions of people. They know that in nature you eventually stop because you caught the prey or ate enough. So to bypass this, they created the bottomless effect. By removing stopping cues like the end of the page, they make sure that feeling of done never arrives. Because if you never feel done, you never stop.
Their mind doesn't wake up and say, do I still want to do this? Because you keep sort of putting your elbow in the door and saying, hey, there's one more thing for you.
But removing the finish line is just the beginning. Because they didn't just make it endless, they made it personal. What does personal even mean? It means they stopped just removing the finish line. They started building a trap designed specifically for us. They often know enough about your behavior to predict what will keep you engaged before you do. And every interaction sharpens it, until eventually it becomes a habit. And you know how difficult it is to break a habit, especially a bad one. But every habit follows a pattern. Nir Eyal, in his book Hooked, mapped that pattern out. He called it the Hook model. 4 stages, simple in theory, but extremely effective in practice, and it starts with an external trigger. Back in the day, it could be some noise in the bushes that drew our ancestors' attention. Now it's a ping, a vibration, a little red number on an icon. But a ping alone isn't enough. Because you can ignore a ping. What they actually want is to get inside your head. They want that external ping to reach into your emotions. Your curiosity, uncertainty, fear of missing out. You don't check the app just because your phone buzzed. You check it because it made you feel something.
If you swipe over that notification, it schedules you into spending a little bit of time getting sucked into something that maybe you didn't intend to get sucked into.
And that feeling pulls you toward action, the next step in the Hook model. You grab your phone, click on a notification just to find out that one of your friends had an eggplant for breakfast. True story. And then you sigh with relief, close the app, and go back to whatever you were doing, right? Yeah, right. If you're like me, it never ends with just one. You invested all this effort just to see your friend's breakfast eggplant? You feel totally unsatisfied. What if there is something more exciting just a little further down the feed? And this leads to the most powerful part of the digital trap, the variable reward. We talked earlier about how our ancestors never knew what to expect next. If you knew exactly what you'd see every time you refreshed your feed, you would eventually stop. Your dopamine would plateau, you'd get bored, so the attention architects hide the good content, like funny videos, the surprising story, the post that actually makes you think, behind a wall of noise. And so you scroll past 3, 5, 9 uninteresting posts to find one that gives you a hit. But what if the next one is even better? So you keep scrolling and scrolling until you're no longer looking for anything specific. You're hunting for the next dopamine spike. Feels almost like gambling, doesn't it? You slide your thumb up, there is a slight delay, new content appears. But that pull, that pause, that reveal, it mimics the tension of a gambler waiting for a jackpot. That's because the scroll works exactly like the lever of a Las Vegas slot machine.
It's sprinkled all throughout these products because it's a very compelling way of getting people's attention.
This is why you can spend 3 hours on an app and walk away feeling like you saw nothing of value. Because value was never the point. You were there gambling your time and attention for the maybe. Not because you're weak, but because the system was designed that way. Picture a teenager you know, maybe your own kid, a nephew, a neighbor's child. Now, think about how many hours a day they spend looking at a screen. Do they seem more focused than they were 5 years ago or less? Because what's happening to them is not just passing time. Have you ever picked up your phone and genuinely couldn't remember why? You just reached for it. No notification, no reason, just an automatic reflex. That moment, that tiny mindless grab is not just a bad habit. It's the system working exactly as designed. Because the more you use it, the more your brain rewires around it.
The phone has become easily the most addictive product on earth, and we've always, as a human being, sought out this dopamine chemical, but we've never had it so instantaneously accessible.
The part of your brain responsible for focus, planning, and impulse control, it weakens. Your brain actually starts to change. So every time your attention shifts to a screen, your brain pays a tax.
That initiates a context shift in your brain, right? We're going to start to suppress some neural networks. We're going to try to amplify some others. It's a pretty complicated process, actually. There's a sort of neurological cascade that happens.
It often takes more than 20 minutes to fully recover your focus after a single distraction. Check your phone 3 times an hour, and you essentially have no deep focus left at all, just a permanent low-grade mental fog. And if you're running a business, deep focus is the one resource that separates real progress from just staying busy. But your business isn't the only thing competing for your focus. Every like, every post, every minute you spend on a platform, that's not just lost time. That is your investment, and the fourth and final stage of the hook model. And unlike every other investment you make, this one pays returns to someone else. Every interaction teaches the platform more about you. Every data point makes the next trigger more precise, more personal, more irresistible. And the longer you stay, the less you notice you're staying. So, are we doomed? Are we just rats in a box pressing levers forever? No. And here's why. The hook model is psychologically neutral. It has no agenda of its own. The same 4 stages that keep you scrolling through breakfast eggplants at midnight can be used to build something genuinely useful. Something your customers actually come back to on their own. Not because you tricked them, but because you made their lives easier. Most business owners get stuck on the first stage. They think the answer is more triggers. More notifications, more content, more engagement, look at me, look at me, look at me. But think about the apps you actually love using. Not the ones that bombard you, the ones you quietly rely on. Why do you go back? Is it the notifications, or is it because the experience is so seamless you don't even have to think about it? It just works. And that is the secret ingredient. Not engagement. Seamlessness.
It's the best thing at addicting people and putting you in the zone.
Last week I got an email from my dentist saying my x-ray report was ready. Simple enough trigger. I was curious, what would it say? Good news, something to worry about? That uncertainty pulled me in. External trigger became internal, I was ready to take action, and that's when I had to click through 5 screens, fill out a form, wait for receptionist to call me, and schedule a call with the dentist just to discuss a report I could have read in 30 seconds. I mean, I love my dentist, but that's exactly where the loop broke. The trigger was perfect, the reward was real, but the action killed it. That's where most businesses lose their customers, not at the front door, but on the staircase. The hook model's power isn't how loud the trigger is, it's how frictionless the path from trigger to reward is. So instead of asking how do I stay top of mind, ask how do I become the path of least resistance. Because in a world where your customer's attention is the most competed for resource on the planet, the business that removes the most friction to the customers to actually deliver on the promise that got their attention in the first place wins. The rat in that 1954 lab pressed the lever 2,000 times an hour. But it did it not because it was complicated, but because it was the easiest thing to do in the box. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the channel, please consider subscribing, and see you in the next video.